Sometime in the ancient year of 2014, I went to the theater with my dad to see a film I was quite excited about, the sci-fi epic Interstellar. Being only 12 at the time, I hadn't fully caught up on director Christopher Nolan's entire library of film, yet there's something calling me all the same. I adore McConaughey's dry charm, Hans Zimmer's masterful score, and some visuals that I still believe were filmed in another galaxy. With Interstellar being not only my favorite Nolan movie, but my favorite film of all time, I thought it'd be fun to think. What if I didn't go to the theater with my dad because there was no film to see? What if Interstellar wasn't released as a film at all, but instead, as a game? Before we begin, this video will include heavy spoilers and discussion of Interstellar. If you haven't seen it, I'd of course suggest you watch it before continuing forward in this video. If you have seen it, please enjoy. No, the game won't be 2 hours and 49 minutes of Anne Hathaway theorizing about love and McConaughey crying at screens, even though that already sounds a bit like a Kojima game. Instead, you have to start with the basics of the game and what form it will take. Open world? FPS? Well, let's see how this imaginary scenario plays out. Interstellar, a new IP created by Nolan Studios, is announced with a teaser trailer that creates fan interest due to the branding's prior success in the film industry. Interstellar is marketed to be a departure from the norm by introducing a sprawling game with a focus on constricted realism. What is constricted realism? Well, we'll get to that later. The initial teaser shows off the playable character, naturally voiced by Troy Baker, chasing a drone with his kids in a brilliant display of graphics running on whatever company's hardware had the most money to have it be shown during their conference. Brief glimpses are shown of a rocket taking off, characters yet to be named, and awe-inspiring glimpses of space running on a brand new engine. Fans generate excitement. There exists a hint of confusion as to how Nolan's traditional style would translate to a game setting. Well, that's where I come in. Interstellar is an enclosed open world, much in the vein of Obsidian's The Outer Worlds or 2019's Metro Exodus. Planets will portray the true scale of space, and the sense of adventure will be there, but playable areas will be contained in a way that upholds the story. To begin deciphering the game, we will start with the core gameplay loop, where the player will be doing from moment to moment. The objective of the game, much like the film, is to scour a newly found galaxy for humanity's next home. Whether flying through space in a rocket or walking on a planet's rough surface, the core gameplay loops are simple: move, jump, climb, and explore. Outside of that, the gameplay loop includes setting destinations, surviving the journey there, and determining whether they can sustain human life. A key aspect of the game is exploration, and whether flying near a black hole or staring into the eye of a massive wave, Nolan Studios wanted to feel as if the player is the first human to ever see it. Survival and danger come right along with a sense of awe, and will keep the player on his or her toes at all times. Nolan Studios will release a full trailer at the next E3 and capture the hearts of millions by delving into what will make Interstellar truly special: the stakes. The astronauts aren't exploring for the sake of exploration, they're exploring to save the human race from the impending doom of climate change and a lack of food. Besides the story, how can this sense of urgency manifest itself into a gameplay setting? A simple answer, just like within Zimmer's ingenious score: time. In the film, time filled the shoes of a villain for the team. It was an opposing force that had to be accounted for and challenged in every decision made, in a way making it the plot device. Within the game, time will act in the same way. Every decision the player makes will have time in the forefront, and every moment of the core gameplay loop will have time written in the subscripts. Want to explore a certain planet over another? What if on this certain planet, every 30 minutes is 7 years back on Earth? This mechanic deepens the gameplay loop by introducing the idea of risk versus reward in the game, as well as portraying that sense of urgency in a gameplay form. However, there's a balance that needs to be struck. Lead Nolan studio designers struggle with a simple question: how real is too real? Will the time mechanic make the player spend more time stressing over his or her decisions rather than actually playing the game? Will planning decisions and charting the journey even be fun? To remedy this, Nolan Studios centered on a mantra of constricted realism, where mechanics won't be a constant bind in the player's actions, but instead a method that drive the player along and make the experience truly unique. Difficulty settings will allow for time to be scaled in a way that matches all player preferences. Planets with more exploration and deeper story will have less punishing time constraints. While the sense of urgency is still there, it never grows to the point where players won't explore the experiences devs built in fear of ruining their journey. The question then arises, if time slips by, what is it building toward? Well, Cooper returned 89 years later. So let's make the sweet point of our planet's demise 90 years later. He cut it quite close. Early on in the game, it feels like a carefree, faraway point that will never be reached. However, as the story goes on, players will feel the weight grow as they watch videos of their kids growing on film every time home base is returned to, and decisions will be made accordingly. The story and characters themselves will also react to the increasing time, always adjusting to allow the player to take in as much of the game as possible. Aside of the time mechanics, survival elements will also arise from the planet's hostile environments. Massive waves, ice cliffs, Matt Damon, it's a scary universe out there. That raises the question, how is the story going to allow the player to explore it? Now we get to the hard part, how will the story of Interstellar translate into a game? Some things will have to change. The game will still open on Earth, and the drone running sequence seen in the film and the imaginary game teaser trailer will serve as a tutorial for basic movement, pop, tire, and all. However, much of the sequences on Earth will be greatly shortened in the game. The player will be in space by the first 30 minutes. To still carry the weight of Earth's importance, short playable flashbacks will appear throughout the game to ensure the human connection is felt. These flashbacks can include vital beats such as Cooper's relationship with his children, or his calm before the storm speech with his father-in-law. However, the sequence of Coop leaving his daughter with the watch and his tearful drive away will remain in the game's introduction. That scene is too great to give up. One of the biggest cuts will likely be the Jessica Chastain Earth segments from later in the film. While intense and riveting, they don't quite fit the flashback format, and the multiple video logs will serve to show the grown-up daughter. The astronauts can be similar to the ones in the film. They can even be the exact same characters if needed. As for the time mechanic, the player's time does run out. Players can choose a save point to always travel back to. This isn't ultra hardcore type of situation. The story will mainly be straightforward with plinkets of choice, such as what planets to journey to, much in the same vein as Mario Odyssey. Certain planets will have stronger story elements than others, but each one will introduce side plots that contribute to the overall story, just as Matt Damon's world did in the film. Members of the crew will be affected each time by what occurs on these planets. The player's choices will impact how the team views and reacts to them. The closer to the 90-year endpoint it is, the more tensions will rise. To provide a safety net, they can even steer the player into remaining on time track if things get thrown off. The player's children and their growth will be a driving force, just as they were in the film. Moral questions arise: saving one's family over humanity, starting anew without humanity, and whether humanity is even worth saving. Nolan Studios had to strike the perfect balance in the story to coexist with the gameplay mechanics, and the beats of the film serve quite nicely within that place. Lastly, time to address the elephant in the room, Interstellar's ending. How can everything from entering the black hole to traversing the fourth dimension work in gameplay? Will it have to be scrapped entirely? Well, honestly, no. The climax of the game will consist of the iconic docking sequence and the final chase to reach the black hole. Have the player leap into the black hole, screen dark as the controller wildly shakes in his or her hands until silence. The mind-bending display of the bookcase dimension comes into view, and the player is free to try and decipher what is occurring. Tars will guide the player through the trippy sequence reminiscent of the film as they watch his daughter put the pieces together. The watch, the ghost. The score deepens and twists as the player moves from an identical corridor to corridor, trying to wrap his or her 3D perception into a 4D space. The game concludes with the player walking through a new world to meet his daughter resting in the hospital bed, surrounded by new people and even newer technology. The game ends in the same tearful sequence of their reunion, as well as Brand's combination of hopeless hope as she surveys her new home. To truly picture this game, let's do a stripped down look at how a certain mission in the game could play out. As for the visuals, you may have to put your imagination to the test. You have visited 4 planets at this point. Each one has had consequences on the journey. A new fuel source, loss of almost all provisions, one very angry crew member, and the realization that humanity was never meant to be saved. Feeling desperate and anxious, the crew poses the question, where to next? 2 choices arise: travel to a toxic waste dump with a beacon that states habitable, or go to an Earth-like planet closer to the black hole. The toxic dump has very little time slippage, but chances of success are quite low. However, if the beacon is correct, it could be the perfect place to start a new colony with the fertilized eggs on board. As for the Terror clone, due to its proximity to the black hole, time will slip away like air from a balloon. The 90-year mark is readily approaching, but this could be the planet to save humanity. The crew struggles within itself, especially the astronaut that you managed to turn against you in a prior scramble. All it takes is a decision. And that decision is you. What would you do? This is obviously an overly intense late game example, but it highlights the sense of stakes and risk that I greatly admired within the film. This is humanity's last hope, and that means making the hard decision that will decide the fate of your family and billions. For the sake of this hypothetical, after you see a flashback of a baseball game with your children, a decision is made. Humanity will not be given up on. The rocket zooms forward using all of the newly found fuel from a previous planet raid. The slipping crew member loses all of your trust. Due to your decision, this is all or nothing. You find an ice hellscape, yes. Matt Damon's storyline plays out in full, and you move on in horror as you watch the decision crumble before your eyes. You fight for your life, climb and scale ice cliffs to return to your pod, and watch as a resentful astronaut that doesn't trust claims about Matt Damon's deranged intentions result in his fiery death. This kickstarts the climax sequence of the game, no time for caution at all. Now, what about the toxic planet mentioned earlier? What about every planet missed due to time constraints and choices? While it would be readily possible to see everything in one playthrough, this is where the replay value truly kicks in. New things to explore, new decisions to make, and a story that will at its core remain similar changes with every iteration. This is the power of games, and this is why I believe Interstellar will be fantastic to experience with the controller in hand and you behind it. From beautiful space visuals to having the player experience the stakes of saving humanity, this is my first movie to game showcase. So much in cinema, as well as other avenues of media, would work well in the gameplay setting, and I'm beyond excited to explore it all. Thank you for watching. Just as Professor Brand said to the Interstellar crew, do not go gentle into that good night.